it's me. Hello. Merry Christmas, everyone. From us.
Yes. This is the last episode of the year, number 13. Unlucky for some. I think it's a lucky number in other cultures, so we're not going to overthink that.
No, and it is Friday as well, which is, interpret that as you will. It's a good omen for us.
So, we have Frank Berry today, amazing filmmaker.
Berry Christmas, everybody.
Oh, sorry, Frank. Tried to avoid it.
I couldn't resist.
An amazing filmmaker, and he invited me out to class to do. Paul wasn't able to make it, and so we did it in a classroom. So again, we're not in the studio, so just apologise for any background noise. Really great conversation about his films. He had 3 features under his belt now: Ballymun, Lullaby, I Used to Live Here, and the forthcoming Michael Inside, which will be out in the spring. And honestly, it's one of the best Irish films of the last few years. I got to see a screening of it a few weeks ago, and it's fantastic. So before that, we just want to say thanks to all our listeners and all our amazing guests who've been on.
Yeah, it's been obviously a learning experience for both of us, but we've really enjoyed it. So a massive thanks to everybody who's taken time out to contribute so far. We will be back in the new year with some really interesting people. If you have any suggestions on who maybe you'd like to hear speak or who we could have on, we'd really appreciate your feedback. You can get us. You can comment on the video below, or you can also contact us at FNI WrapChat@gmail.com with any suggestions or feedback that you have.
Yeah. So we're going to take a little bit of a break, and we'll be back hopefully some stage in January. But we want to kind of take the time to see where we can improve, and so hopefully we'll be back with an even better WrapChat. And
here's a word from us about a word for thanking our sponsors.
Yes.
I guess, listen, we've had tremendous support from some really, really fantastic organisations and people through social media, and a lot of people sharing and posting about what it is that we're trying to achieve with this. So massive thanks to Westland Studios, as always. They've been fantastic in terms of providing a studio space and a home for us, and they've made all of our guests feel really welcome, and we really appreciate that. As well as that, we'd like to thank everybody at A4 Sounds that have been a great help to us in terms of the practicalities of getting this together. And also Roger Kenny Photography, who helped us out with the photography for the design and promo materials, and Owen Wheelahan, who did the graphic design for our poster work and social media banners and so on. And last but certainly not least, the wonderful composer Pat O'Connor, who provided our theme tune.
Not just one, but two theme tunes.
Yes. So, for all the train spotters out there, have a listen, and you might notice a little bit of a change.
It's a little bit. We're just going with a little more of a cinematic version of the theme tune, just the end of to see the year out. And if people prefer it, we might keep it. we might keep it for next year. Yeah. So Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year from us. And again, if you're not familiar with our Facebook group and services, check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And we've plenty of interesting Film Network Ireland orientated events and get-togethers in the new year. So thanks a mil and Merry Christmas. Say goodbye, Paul. You did such a good job. Okay, thanks very much, and have a great Christmas. Look after yourselves, and we'll see you in the new year. In Closter Dulig with Frank Berry. Thanks very much for taking the time to do this interview.
It's a pleasure, Paul.
We caught a screening the screening the other day of Michael Inside, absolutely fantastic. So I can't wait to talk about that. But maybe first we'll just go back to the start and talk about your career, how you got into film.
Sure. Yeah, well, for me, it started in college. I did a broad media degree. Well, first of all, it was a diploma. I was a student here in Clough-Dulick, actually.
Yeah.
And so we did a broad media course that covered, documentary filmmaking, television production, creative writing, photography. And I remember early on being very drawn to the writing and to the photography and editing. And at the time, we had the option to go and continue our studies in the UK and do a year in Wolverhampton and top up and get a degree, which is what I did. And then I came back and applied for postgraduate work. And by that point, when I was over in the UK, we made an awful lot of documentaries and an awful lot of so it was very practical. And I made my first kind of documentaries, I think, that were less group work and more that I directed in that period. And then I applied for a postgrad in DIT in film production. So I spent a year shooting on 16mm and editing on Avid and Steenbeck and learning kind of really practical things about filmmaking in that year. It was a very intense year. And then 2 people were picked out of the class to direct the final films, and I was one of them, and I got an enormous amount of encouragement from that. And that kind of really inspired me to keep going.
Yeah. And what were those films?
Yeah, well, the one that I directed was a film called Fanatic. So it was written by Patrick Butler, another student on the course, and I mean, they were practical applications of everything that we were learning, and people in the class were given different roles, like a DOP and production designer, and the class crewed them really, and so we all pitched to see who would direct and what your vision of it is, etc. So I took great encouragement from that. I loved the process of shooting on film and learned a lot there. And then after that, I made another short film, like directly using my students from the class and the equipment from DIT. We made another film called Boat Racing very, very quickly afterwards. And during that period, after the few years after I left DIT, I made an awful lot of different types of stuff. And I made music videos and short films, and we did a kind of a no-budget TV drama. So there was a period there where I was actually teaching full-time, because I went straight into teaching after I left.
Okay.
I was making a lot of work there.
Yeah.
And so it was a great period. I worked with some amazing people, and some of the projects were tough, some were easier, but you learn obviously from everything. And I took opportunities, and I learned. But very quickly, I kind of started to get a sense that I wasn't really doing the work that I really felt drawn to.
Okay.
And I started making. Smaller community type of DVDs, community video work. Okay. So it wasn't that there weren't really the types of films that you would send to a film festival.
Right. Yeah.
But they were work that I loved doing. You know, they were you would meet somebody who represents an organisation. They have something to say that then not necessarily have a big budget, but they're doing something that is worthwhile.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. And so I just found myself naturally feeling very comfortable in that environment of listening to people and actually figuring out what is it that they're trying to put across, and we'll make a little film about that. And they were little documentaries, some of them were dramas, and that's really where I found my feet, and that's really where I started to develop, and that led to my first feature in cinemas. It was a documentary called Ballyman Lullaby, and the roots of that film came from the community work.
Yeah. And just to go back a bit, because you did a lot of film school, and there's so many routes into filmmaking. I think you're one of the first people that we've had on the podcast that went through film school. I went through film school. What are your kind of thoughts in general on the importance of that in filmmaking?
Well, I think everybody's on an individual journey,
Yeah.
and I think that the purpose. I suppose I'm speaking more as a tutor here myself as well, but having gone through the process, I see my role as being helping people along their own path, really, and listening to them, and so I think it's very valuable in that in college. You go through a lot of personal development. There's an awful lot going on other than the syllabus.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sitting on tables and chatting.
Yeah.
You watch an awful lot of films. So I'd be an advocate of it, but I don't think it's for everyone.
Yeah.
And, I think whatever, if you're motivated and you really are passionate about making films and you really want to express yourself, you'll find the path that's right for you. And if you go into college and you sit down and you go, this is not for me, just means it's just not the path that you're best kind of suited for.
Yeah.
And if you're driven and you really want to do it, you'll find your path, Yeah. So generally speaking, for me as a tutor, the people that come in here and sit in front of us and say, I want to study film, really kind of want to be here,
Yeah.
And, and it's very, very beneficial for them, know.
Yeah. Cool. So you touched on Ballymun Lullaby. When I mention it to other people, it's a real beloved film. It's real, especially from people around that area. Paul Butler Lennox, who couldn't be here today, he's a huge fan of it, and he's from there. So just talk us about how you came across it, and then your vision. Did you intend it to be this kind of slightly comedic documentary? Or?
Yeah, well, the roots of it came from the community video work I mentioned earlier, where it was one of the first ones that we did. Myself and Kevin Duffy, my good friend, who shot most of my that work over those years with me, and we went out to Ballymun, and of course the towers were still standing at that point, and we made a video for Ron Cooney, and it was basically just showing the work that he does, and he was seeking funding, and he was engaging with young people, trying to bring this big idea that he had to life, which was that he'd have a music school and engage young people in his passion in music. And we spent 6 months making that DVD, and we gave it to them, and it was all about the creation of a music song called Fire, and it was a big performance in the Axis at the end, and that was, we just loved it, myself and Kevin, we loved the community, we loved the experience, we were totally inspired by Ron, and we stayed friends with Ron, and we would go out and film little things for him over the years, and then he rang. It's a long-winded answer. Sorry.
Oh, that's great.
Okay, he rang me then in 2009. Actually, it was Tommy Cook, who's from the DIT Community Links program, where a lot of the projects that we did came from, rang me and said, "Would you go out to Ron in Ballymun? They're opening up a new music room there, and Archbishop Desmond Tutu was in town." And so I went out with Kevin and that morning, and we filmed the opening of this music room. So part of Ballymun Regeneration, they built a facility, like a room for Ron, and it was this beautiful room. And I went back and I was just like, God, Ron is just totally in his element. He's set up. He's got this. He said, you've got the boozer, you've got this, and then you've got a music room, a concrete, facility to support what he's doing. Yeah. And I was so kind of inspired by it. And then the young people played a little bit of music that they were writing with composer Darrell O'Toole. Well, he wrote the music, but he co-wrote the lyrics with them. And the music was all about the history of Ballymun. It was all about their moving from flats into houses, and it was all from the young people. And it's this incredible orchestral music. And I said to Kevin at the time, well, if we're ever going to turn this type of work that we're doing into a longer documentary, a feature doc perhaps, then this is the subject, and this is what because we're totally inspired by Ron. And first of all, it was going to be perhaps a year in the life of the music room, and as you say, the comedic aspect of it, which is Ron's character. He got such a wonderful way with the young people, and he's so inspiring. I just thought, well, all we need to do is just come here and just spend time with Ron, and then just the project evolved, and I started to see the music come to life as we went out and we filmed the RTE Concert Orchestra recording the music, and I started listening more to the lyrics and getting to know the people who Dara and Ron had worked with, Tara O'Brien and Darren Scully and Wayne Beatty, and I started to the project expanded in my mind to being, how amazing would it be if we actually made a film that told the story of the building of the towers, and then the knocking, right up to the knocking of them down. We tell those 40 years from the point of view of the young people in the area. Yeah. And that's when I went into RTE and started looking at archive footage, right. And we just became totally immersed in it, and we missed some of the steps along the way because some of the things happened before we started filming. Yeah. It wasn't perfect as a process, but we were very driven by putting on screen what Ron was doing.
Right.
That was the inspiration of it, and we shot a promo for him last year. We're still, it's like a long-term thing. We just think the world of him, really.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
You just mentioned the archive there. Was that the first time you kind of used archive extensively? How was the experience?
Yeah, it was actually, and I just contacted RTE. Well, first of all, I went into RTE and I typed. You go and you type in Ballymun and all the, you've probably done it, and went through and found some really, really interesting things, and they were brilliant in there in terms of facilitating. I said, look, I don't have budget yet, They were, they I'm not, they waited until we got completion funding. I think it was a few extra. They just, probably shouldn't, but anyway, they were kind to me, and then I went into the Access in Ballymun, and there's a small company in there, Ballymun Communications. I'm not sure if they're still called that, but Ollie McGlinchey said, "Who's doing this?" And I said, "It's just us, really." And he goes, "Okay, so you've no budget?" And I said, "No, we've no budget." And then he brought me over to a filing cabinet, and he opened the filing cabinet and said, "There you go." And he showed me loads and loads and loads of tapes that were rushes of student work that's been happening, going on in Ballymun since the 80s,
right.
And perhaps the early 90s. It went back to U-matic tape, as far as I can remember, and he said, "There you go," and he said, just bring it back,
Right.
And I took that responsibility, very, very seriously, and that I was very, very quick to go through it, find what I needed, and bring it straight back. I was so grateful to him for just saying, "There you go." It was just a very, very kind of community helping me out, feeling about it, and and actually. The best archive footage that I got, some of the best stuff I got. It's hard to it's a bit sweeping to say that, but I got amazing archive footage in that from there, because looking at rushes, I used some images slightly out of context, where there was somebody would have made a drama, and you'd have a shot of a father looking at the window of a flat, of one of the flats, as part of a drama. But if you just take that one shot and you have someone speaking over it, it says something like a photograph,
Right.
And I was able to kind of really examine the material and use it in a way that I felt was really expressive. You know?
Yeah, brilliant. So that then. You got a bit of a cinematic release, and it was on RTE. How did you find the kind of distribution process?
Well, the film board were really responsive. Right. We brought it to Joanne O'Hagan was the executive producer on a show, who I knew, and Donna, my wife, is good friends with, and obviously we're friends now. We've been through this great experience together. And she was brilliant. She came into the film board with me, and we showed them what we were doing, and they gave us completion funding, but we were still kind of slightly in production. So but they were very, 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 very responsive, and that put a huge wind in our sails. And And then we finished the film, and they gave us direct distribution funding. So, I mean, it was a small release. It was in I think, the UCI, or it was in the IFI, and so I think two or three cinemas.
Yeah.
And but it was enormously satisfying for me, because I felt that I had made a film using the tools that myself and Kevin had been using all this time, and I felt that I could see. When you're watching a film, you can see yourself. You've made the film, as opposed to making a film that would look like a lot of other people could have made. There's that fundamental kind of thing. I remember going into the cinema, the UGC actually, to see the posters were up, and I got talking to somebody, and I was telling that one of the cameras that we used to shoot the film was in my pocket,
Right.
And it was a very satisfying thing. So, regardless of the scale of the release or any of that, but it was a significant moment for me, because I felt like I was used my own process, and I felt a sense of kind of satisfaction about actually having it released, you know.
Yeah. And then, did that lead to I Used to Live Here, or was that a separate thing?
Yeah, it did in a way, because I was really excited by the fact that I really enjoyed making a film with a community, and spending time there, and telling a small story.
Yeah.
And if what I learned from Ballymun Lullaby was, by focusing in on a small story in a community, in a way, by being very, very focused on this tiny, tiny story, it can echo quite large, and it can say something that can be quite much bigger,
Yeah.
And when I travelled around with the film in different places, people would tell me stories. And they would say, well, what the story you told in Ballymun Lullaby has happened here,
Right.
And for example, when we went to TIFF Kids, and at the Q&A after the screening, was a music teacher was doing the questions with me from an area outside of Toronto called Regent's Park, and it's a high-rise flat complex, and they were in the process of knocking down as a social failure, same as deemed by Ballymun as a social failure. They were knocking the towers down, and he was engaged in a music project. It was exactly the same as Ballymun.
Really?
And then we went to LA with the film, and somebody in the Q&A said that this story is very similar to what happens in South Central.
Wow.
And so it was just inspiring to me to actually focus in on small stories, and actually to find something very, very important there.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to work within a community again, and with I Used to Live Here, it started with a newspaper article that I read called "We Must Give Young People a Reason to Live," and then there's the second part of that article saying, which is called "Breaking the Ripple Effects of Suicide," and it had an effect on me. The way it was written by Dr. Tony Bates, and the article describes how when a suicide tragedy occurs in a community, that how it can affect other people in that community who are in their own crisis, and how tragically you can have a rise in suicides in a locality in a short space of time, called a suicide cluster. And I read the article, and it kind of disturbed me,
Right.
and I felt that this is. I know there's a kind of, you got to be very careful when talking about suicide, but I really felt that this was a kind of a social dynamic that we all needed to be aware of, because to be aware of it is to be equipped to deal with it when a tragedy occurs. And so I didn't want to make a documentary. I felt I could have gone back to the film board with a documentary idea and been well placed there as somebody who might get funding for another film.
Yeah.
But I felt with this subject, that it needed. I didn't want to make a documentary about it because I didn't want. I was totally kind of reading all about suicide ideation and media guidelines and talking an awful lot about this, and I was concerned about exposing the audience, particularly in the context of young people, to real cases, because even if you're talking about somebody who died by suicide and you are condemning it, there's a danger that somebody in crisis may take an implicit permission from what you're saying, in that, well, I have the same problems as that person, and that was their solution, even though you could be banging a drum saying, don't do this, you know? So it's very, very delicate, you know, and so I took, first of all, I placed myself responsibly with the National Centre for Youth Mental Health. Tony Bates, the author of the article, was actually the head of the National Centre for Youth Mental Health, and we kind of, you know, he was very, very supportive, and, you know, so I started there, and then I thought, okay, well, in light of everything I'm reading, I think I would feel happier if we made a fictional film. And we actually put the dynamic up on screen so that we can talk about these characters and their emotions, and we can see on a big picture how when one person who's not really involved in the story dies by suicide, how one of our characters who we care about, how it affects them, who's in their own crisis, and how they kind of connect with their pain and get over this crisis, because everybody, with time, as we all know, it's possible for everybody, and we wanted to kind of show that in a fictional way. So
I think I sort of read that you said you wanted fictional but truthful. I think that's a great way of putting it.
Yes,
and it's very. It kind of stuck with me as a really good kind of model for making this kind of film.
Yes.
Maybe elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you know the phrase that a documentary can be a lie and a drama can be true, you know? So, absolutely. The idea that it's fictional but it's true is pretty much what I try and do with both dramas that I've done, which is that it's... you know, it's purposeful, and that we can use it as a way of talking about a certain subject, and so the idea was to make something that is that comes from the hearts of a particular bunch of people. Actually, I missed I skipped a kind of a step where Micheline Egan in Headstrong, who's working there, working with Tony, rang me up and said, you know, what you're talking about doing, and there's a community in Tala who are making a drama at the moment, a DVD, trying to cope with a series of tragedies in their community for the young people to try and understand, you know. So they were already doing it. So I drove out to Kilnarden in 2012, and I sat down with Eileen Hederman and you know, a couple of other youth workers there, and we kind of talked for a couple of hours, and I said what I was trying to do, and so they really harmonised with it, and we had the kind of very much a shared conviction, and they said, well, maybe the thing to do is just to start coming down to the youth clubs, the youth nights, and so I did that, got to know the young people, and did camera workshops and just engaged with them, and quickly kind of bonded with everybody there. I felt like I worked there, you know, and I said I'd like this to be a kind of an expression from this community, so that we'll cast it from we'll cast everybody from the one community centre, everybody under this roof, and then we'll find people in the area to be crew as well, and we'll make the film from here, and so again, it was similar to Ballymun Lullaby in that it was an immersion in the community for a period of time, and then making a film together with them, you know.
And maybe talk about how you worked with actors, because most people were kind of non-actors, and what are the kind of the pros and cons of that kind of process?
Yeah, well, first of all, I suppose the approach was not to be too, not to think about it too much, and just to try and organically evolve the project in ways that felt right. So what felt right to me was not to use the word acting, because a lot of the young people that I was meeting would have been kind of turned off by that, and they may say that's not for me. So we said all you have to do is come in. We'll have scenes written on a piece of paper. You just have to read them out loud. And some of the young people coming in would laugh at the prospect and take the piss out of me, and then leave. And then what was gratifying for me was months later you'd see them kind of sheepishly step in and take a seat,
Right.
and that was really exciting for me, because you just don't know what those guys are going to do, because they're not people who would automatically be first in line for an audition or anything, and I was just kind of like interesting to see, because I'm learning as well about behaviour and attitudes and everything, and I'm just fascinated to see what these guys will do in this space, and so they just had to read the lines. And it's a process. There's nothing new about this process, It's well established, obviously, and they just read the lines over and over again, and about 8 or 9 times. Usually, around the 8th time, they all laugh, and the 9th time they get angry, and then that's time to put the scripts down. And I say, right, well, let's see how far we can get through the scene without actually looking at the page. And sometimes they go right to the end of the scene, and the scenes in my films are generally quite short, so they'd probably get to the end of the scene, and then so once they got to the end of the scene, it's like, oh, okay, we do, okay, that's great, and there's generally a sense of relief and happiness, and then let's do it again, and let's and so they would read this, they'd look at each other, they're sitting opposite each other, and they'd laugh, be a bit embarrassed, but then they'd get to the end of the scene. And then by the 2nd or 3rd time, I'd ask them, should we change any lines or whatever, and then we would change whatever felt awkward for them. And then it would just start to sound a bit like conversation,
right.
And because we'd spent so long with the youth workers talking about mental health. We didn't talk about suicide or anything like that. We talked about just the importance of mental health and talking about your problems and just their lives, and because they knew that this was an expression of the lives that they actually lead and the world that they're living in. They started to bring naturally their own intonation and colour and everything to the delivery of the lines, So kind of in a way, we kind of got around the word acting, and I mean, it didn't work for everybody, but it worked for a lot of people, and we had the adults, the youth workers, and some of the parents and that, and lots of people got involved, you know.
Yeah, and say your leads, Jordan and David, were they cast in more of a conventional way, or how was that?
No, there weren't. There was again what I was saying earlier about following your instincts. Like my brain was saying, if you want to make a feature film, you can't really cast everybody from the one place.
Right.
The more conventional approach, which obviously clearly works and is really successful for a reason, is the trawl. Where you go out and you visit stage schools and but the downside of that perhaps is that you very often get the people who really want to do it. So this was a case of, it was just slightly different, specific to this project, where I sat on that high stool in the corner of the youth space and got to know everybody. And it's a case of taking a hard look at one place, as opposed to going and covering a lot of geography. Just by taking a hard look and getting to know people and relaxing them, allowing them in a way to express themselves without feeling kind of intimidated by a big camera or people that they don't know and all that kind of stuff. But just and Jordan wasn't really involved in the workshops. She came down to the centre late in the process. Actually, somebody else was playing Amy, who decided that she didn't want to do it anymore,
okay.
And Dav was just in the background of. We actually were filming a test shoot on the street, and Dav was an extra, And I asked one of the youth workers about this chap here. I pointed to him, and one of the youth workers said to me, "Oh, he's great. He's a lovely lad. He's very quiet. So may not be the first choice, but he's very but he's really really great guy, and that's really it for me. If I felt that he had the right attitude to actually play the part. I knew the second I met Jordan, it's very clear she had the maturity. She's just a really positive person, and I knew that she would be great playing the lead. And as soon as I got to know Dav, I felt the same way. Both of them never let me down. They were never late, and they were. It's really hard to make a film like this. We shot for 6 months every weekend, and of course I have kids. It's hard on the family. It's hard on the whole. But it was the community. It was the people I was working with that we all were energized by. You want to go out and meet the challenges, and they help, and they recognise the opportunity, and they're 100% there. So Dav is now, people are saying great things about his performance in Michael Inside, but Dav and Jordan live around the corner from each other,
Right. And so they're two rising stars. It's funny that you uncovered, because I think they're both going to have amazing careers.
But you know what, though, Paul, there's more there, and there really is.
That's great. So. Again, moving on from there, was that kind of another direct lead into Michael Inside, and you kind of used a similar kind of process again,
yes, it was similar, but also it needed to change as well. So I Still Live Here allowed me to make another drama. So I think by making I Still Live Here, there was probably more faith in I mean, I didn't really have much of a track record in drama before that, so I needed to get I Still Live Here up on its legs. And after the first time I showed it to the film board, they were very responsive again. And and then they helped finish it, and then they supported the distribution and all that. And then. So I had the opportunity. I got Michael Inside into development pretty quickly after I finished I Still Live Here, because the idea for Michael Inside came to me during my time making I Still Live Here, where I saw a lot of and I got to know a lot of young people who may have left school early. Anybody working in this area on a day-to-day basis will know what I'm talking about. Obviously, where you meet amazing people, great kids. And they're looking at you, and they're very, very sincere, but they may be trouble in school, and they may be a bit wild, But the heartbreaking thing is that when you see the potential, and then you see them drifting from that, and so a lot of young people would have that I've met, were very vulnerable, and may have left school early. And are not interested in being, gangsters or any of the characters that you read in the media and all this stuff going on. They're actually growing up, and their lives have gone a little wrong early, in that they may have fallen out with a teacher, or decided they didn't want, or for whatever personal reasons at home or whatever, that their lives have gone off track, and. They're just very, very vulnerable to what's going on around them, and my instinct was to make a film where about the penal system, where the nucleus of the drama is not necessarily the nucleus of the crime. So we actually don't tell a story about guys involved in serious crime. We actually turn the camera to the side, and we film somebody on the periphery who's maybe two people away from all that activity, who either we all know it's true that somebody vulnerable like that, who's carrying pain perhaps for whatever reason, or who's been damaged at a young age, can start taking drugs, or haplessly can due to their own naivety or whatever, are eager to please, can hold a bag of drugs for somebody in the area, and their lives are really kind of changed very, very initially in a very subtle way, but every day that goes by since they started either taking drugs or whatever it was, they get further and further away from the path that they were on, and. So I saw that, you know, great kids just sitting around with nothing to do, and they get up late and they stay up late, and I brought this idea into Pathways, I contacted the prison service, and I'd done a community video for Trinity House years ago, and I met Michael Donlan, who's the head of the Irish Prison Service back then, and I contacted him, and he said, "Are you still teaching, Frank?" I said, "I am." He said, "Well, maybe you know, the CDETB, who I work for here in Dulig, they have a prison education service, and it was just a really great piece of advice." He said, just give them a call, you know. And I went in there and got to know them, and again I found myself in another environment where every week I was going in, meeting a group of people, and and they're all former prisoners who started their education in prison, and this is the place that they go to once they're released to continue, for example, a literacy qualification or a junior cert or whatever, and they get advice on their journey and what path to take next. And so I went in every week for about 18 months, and as soon as I told the former prisoners about this idea of telling Michael's story, so many of them nodded and said, "That's my story." Really? You know, and I was never interested in all this that you're reading, you know, and some of them will have been in a lot of prisons and done a lot of time, and but their lives just changed when they were young, and they spent an awful lot of time inside, and they found themselves, their lives getting out of reach, really. So that's how that process began.
Okay. One of the things watching the film that struck me, it feels realistic, but it's also cinematic, and in that way it kind of reminded me of Ken Loach, in that way that he's able to make films that are issue films, but they're also very engaging and dramatic, and easy to look at. I was just wondering your process in directing, say, that side of making Michael Inside. What were your influences, and what kind of was your vision for the film?
Well, Ken Loach is an enormous influence, obviously. He's a huge influence for as long as I can remember. I show Kathy Come Home here every year to my students. I watch it every year. Right. But obviously his cinema work as well. So he's a huge influence, and the ethos of his films and the intention of his films. When I was making I Used to Live Here, we did a little test shoot. We did a lot of test shooting, you know, and I would bring the footage home, and I would edit them, and I could never get it. I think at one point I spent about a month trying to edit a scene, and I couldn't get it to feel right. And then I remembered, you know, lots of kind of European filmmakers like Christian Mungiu and Bellatar and these guys. Mungiu, I think I'm saying that right. And I just loved the idea of because I couldn't edit this scene. It just felt like I was in an environment where I was working with non-professionals, and we were trying to say something about their lives, and I was cutting it like a movie, like, you know, coverage singles, and it felt like I didn't want to say to the participants, we call them not actors, but to the participants, okay, move over here, we're going to do it again. I didn't want to treat them like actors, so inspired by those types of films, I thought, right, well, what if we shoot every scene in one shot, so there's no coverage, there's no kind of somewhere in the back of the audience's mind that they know when they're watching. And that's the thing, I'll never do that again, by the way. But for I Used to Live Here, they felt that they're watching something constructive and something created, you know. And there's a little bit of manipulation, I suppose, in the back of your mind when you're watching that, you know. And so I felt, okay, well, in a longer shot, then you're inhabiting a time frame with the actors, in the scene, and and if our aim for this film is to try and achieve realism, then let's not cut, and let's just actually let every scene be a kind of a pocket of time, and then hopefully as the film progresses, then there's a cumulative power to that we get a feeling that we're actually experiencing something that is close to reality, and. Now, when we were shooting, we did something like, sometimes we did 15, 20 takes. Yeah. So the time it takes to do that is probably similar to a standard, kind of a more standard approach. But we were just refining it all the time, and there was a sense of why we were doing the next take. Not always, but that we were just evolving the blocking and all those things. So it just started to work, really, and I used to live here. Most of it is in one shot per scene, and when I was making or preparing, I used to Michael Inside, talking to Tom Comerford, a wonderful DOP. He was really interested in this idea of doing these longer shots, and what I wanted to do, and he helped me achieve this, was evolve it a little bit, So we talked an awful lot about that. So Michael Inside still has that long take, single shot per scene approach, and still I think it has a similar effect as I used to live here in terms of realism, but also just montage sequences in there. So we've evolved it a little bit more, and it feels. It feels every I think when you're doing single shot scenes like that, and there's no editing within the scene, when an edit does happen, you really feel it. So Michael Inside has that. I think perhaps that hopefully that power in the scenes as they unfold, but also within the montage sequences.
Yeah,
if you understand what I mean.
How can people see the film?
It's being released by Wildcard Distribution in the spring. I don't have a date yet.
Okay.
But yes, that's all I know at the moment.
Brilliant. I know you're short on time. You have to get back to educating the next wave of Irish filmmakers. So just a question on... We work in a very difficult and challenging industry, and what advice would you give to filmmakers who are starting out in the face of those challenges? How do we kind of fortify ourselves in the face of we face a lot of rejection and a lot of tough challenges like that? What kind of advice would you have?
It's a tough one. I often think about it, and I say it to students here on the film course, and I'm really, like, what are we sending them out to? The best advice, I suppose, I would give would be to practice, and to the more work that you do. Clearly, it's like anything, the better you get. And I learned that by experience, by making lots and lots of community videos and figuring out what is actually making me feel happy in this work, and that led me to develop further. So I would say, a lot of this. I mean, I meet young people who are starting out all the time, and they're very inspiring. Every year there's a few that I meet that are racing through the classics, watching everything, and are really, really keen. And I think I would say keep going. Work hard, keep going, and be aware of those early years, because the work that you do now inevitably will affect the type of films that you make later. Because they're the formative years, and so if you kind of go into a certain area for a few years that you're not quite happy in, but you have a longer term plan, that is making an impact on your development as a filmmaker. So to try and be aware of that.
Brilliant. And have you got anything else that you're working on at the moment?
Yeah, I'm working on another film. So it's early days.
Yeah.
It's hard to kind of talk. I think you know what? I think I talked about Michael Inside too early the last time.
Okay.
You know, like you say it, and then afterwards you go, God, will it get made? You know, maybe I shouldn't have said anything. So I'm developing something, and hopefully it might get some money, and then if it does, then I'll probably be able to talk a little bit more about it.
Great. I look forward to seeing it. Thanks a million.
Thank you, Paul. Pleasure.